Hello, everyone. Right. So, we talk a lot about the fact that for almost 2 decades now, we've been putting together land deals and making 5 to 7 figure returns on each deal, all the while avoiding the big risks of land development. So, in this video, I wanted to walk you through the strategies that we use and give you a high level overview of how it works. Now, before we get started, let's just keep a couple things in mind here. One is I've put together an example timeline of a land deal. So the timeline for taking a piece of raw dirt, running it through the entire land use approval process all the way through subdivision construction. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This is an example timeline here. Another thing to keep in mind is that within this timeline, there will be certain events that you might not understand. And don't worry about that. This is not the point of this video today to explain all of these things. But what we want to do is just understand that, hey, in this example, we're looking at 15 months to get this piece of raw dirt all the way through this construction drawing approval, we call it, shovel ready, and then it moves on to the subdivision construction. Another thing to keep in mind is that this area here of high risk, this is what we absolutely want to avoid. This area here is where developers really put their necks on the line in a big way. And this is why your average developer on an average deal, they'll make in the multiple seven figures because they're taking this really high risk. So what we focus on, one of our main strategies is how to get involved in these deals, make those 5 to 7 figure returns, but avoid this high risk area over here. All right, so let's jump in. First of all, let's talk about the players in this deal. First of all, we've got you and we've got your money. And then down here, we've got the developer and his or her money. And then we'll also take a look as we look at these different examples of the risk level as it decreases and increases with certain decisions that we can make and certain strategies we can use. So let's start with maybe just a very basic example. Let's just say that you go out and you put together a land deal and you really don't want to put any money into it and you don't really want to take any risks. Well, that would be your exit would be right here. So you've put the deal together, you haven't even gotten into the feasibility study yet, you haven't done any due diligence on the thing, and you touch base with a developer and you tell that developer, hey, I've got this project. If you like it, write me a check right here and now. And the developer will then look at the project, and if he likes it, he'll decide if he wants to write you a check. Now, let's compare that to another scenario. Let's say the same deal, the same developer, but instead of making him write you a check right here at this point where he hasn't even done any kind of due diligence or feasibility on the project, you tell him, hey, Mr. Developer, look, I'll let you run your due diligence study, your feasibility study, and you don't have to write me a check until you get through it. And at that point, if you like the deal and you want to continue on, you can write me a check. Well, the difference in size of check between making a developer write you a check here and making your developer write you a check here, well, obviously your check will be bigger here because you're allowing the developer the time to get into this project, spend some money in this feasibility study, and get a certain comfort level, and thereby taking risks off of the table. So your check will be bigger the longer you stay in the deal. And this is a crucial point that we'll dig into a bit deeper as we move on. Another crucial point is obviously the longer you stay in a deal, well, the higher your risk, right? And so if you stay in the deal through the feasibility study, your risk level will be greater than if you were to exit out of the deal right at the beginning. I think you guys can all understand that concept. During this feasibility study, if the developer gets into it and decides that he doesn't like the project and decides to walk away from it, well, then you don't get your check. So the longer you stay in the deal, the more you make, but the higher the risk. All right, now let's talk about this little box over here, your money. And when I say your money, what I'm talking about is this can be cash that you have that you put into a deal. This can be a loan that you take out to get money to put into a deal, a hard money loan or an institutional loan. It can be money from friends and family. It can be money from investors. But the key here is that this is money that's coming from your side as opposed to money coming from the developer. And so another strategy that you can use is you can say, okay, on this deal, I will front the money, for example, to get through the feasibility study. I will pay for the feasibility study, and maybe that'll be 10 grand or 20 grand or 30 grand, whatever that number is, you're going to front the money for that. And you strike a deal with your developer that, hey, once the feasibility study is complete, I take it to a developer, I show him the developer likes the deal, and he writes me a check. And then the developer takes over all the money necessary to get through the rest of these steps all the way down the line. Well, you still have your exit point over here. Now, you could exit here. You could say, okay, I've got this deal. Here's my feasibility study. Developer likes it. He writes you a check and you walk away from the deal. But keep in mind also that you can stay in the deal beyond the point where you have ended your time in putting money into the deal. You could stay in the deal, for example, all the way through preliminary plat approval. And again, don't get hung up on these terms, just recognize that it's longer into the timeline. You could stay in the deal all the way through here, and the developer fronts the money for this, but doesn't have to pay you until the developer achieves his preliminary plat approval. And what that means for you is that, again, the longer you stay in a deal, meaning that you're allowing the developer to take away more and more risks from the deal before he has to pay you, well, that's going to equate into a bigger check for you. And you could also maybe exit after you've gotten your final construction drawings approval. And again, the developer is fronting the money for this, but you are not requiring a payday until a point further on down the line. And the further you stay into it, the bigger your payday will be. Now, obviously, your risk level is commensurate with that. So again, the longer you stay in a deal, the higher your risk will be. And so keep that in mind that obviously with the higher reward comes the higher risk. And the differences in these different scenarios can be huge. If you exit out of a deal here, not put any money into it, maybe a developer will come in, he'll say, yeah, I like the deal, and you negotiate. Maybe he'll write you a check for 15 grand or 30 grand or 50 grand, whatever that number is will be largely dependent on the size of the deal. But that check there could be in the five figures. Whereas if you allow, for example, the developer to get through the feasibility study, well, that check will go up. Maybe it'll go up to 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand. And if you come all the way over here and maybe you don't need a check until the developer has achieved his preliminary plat approval, well, suddenly that check could balloon up into the six figures. You could be into 100 grand, 200 grand. And then if you take in the money that you put into it, if you put the money into these different areas of your own, well then your checks will grow even bigger and you can get into that 500,000 seven-figure marks. So the money into a deal, your time into a deal, when the developer steps into the deal, taking control of it and putting up his own money, all of these things are integral in our strategies, and they are all interdependent on each other, meaning that you can each deal you can strategize different things that you want to do. You can have a deal where you put some money into it. You can have a deal where you don't put any money into it. But that is not your money is not does not determine how long you stay in a deal. You could stay in a deal all the way through the end without putting any money into it. But your payday will go up along with that higher risk that you take. Or you could come all the way down here and exit out here or exit out here. All of this without putting money into it. And so all of these different aspects are separate items that for each deal you put together, you get to decide on and you have control over these things. So that's an overall strategy of how this whole thing comes together. Now, what is it that we teach you in our course? Well, first of all, we teach you the entire land development process. So all of these things that take place in this land development process, we teach you from A to Z. And this is really crucial because in order to put these deals together, you have to structure them correctly so that your developer will look at the deal and say, yeah, I like it. So you have to understand what the developer has to go through to get all the way through to this subdivision construction. The second thing we teach you is how to identify these deals, how to actually go out and find these properties that have residential land development potential. not every piece of property is the same, right? And so there's a lot of a lot of things that go into a piece of property in order to determine if it even has potential or not. The third thing we teach you is how to value these deals, how to value these properties. One 10-acre parcel is not going to have the same value as another 10-acre parcel. There are a lot of things that go into it, and we teach you all of the methods that we use in order to be able to put a value to any given piece of property. The fourth thing we teach you is how to structure these deals. The development deals that we put together are very, very different than, for example, selling a home. The terms of the deal are extremely important to your developer buyer. And so you need to understand how to structure these deals, how to put together an agreement with all of the right ingredients in order to make it work for your developer. So we spend a good amount of time on discussing the structure and the terms of land development deals. And then obviously we teach you how to find these guys, how to find these developers, where to look for them, the different types of developers out there, and depending on the projects you put together, how to decide what developer to approach or what developers to approach with your deals. So again, we've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and we consistently put these deals together, and we see those 5 to 7 figure returns, all the while avoiding this big risk area here, which is purchasing the property and funding the subdivision construction. This area here this is where it turns into multi-million dollar investments. Your developer, when he gets to this point of buying the land, actually closing on it, and then taking out a construction loan to build his subdivision, those are very often in the 2, 3, 5, 10, $20 million marks, and that is a very high risk area, and it is not one that we recommend our participants to dive into, at least not in the beginning, before they have a firm understanding and are able to put together some deals, see some 5 to 7 figure returns, and at some point down the road, if they want to delve into this high risk area, they absolutely can, as we do today. But again, this is not an area that we focus on because of that high risk element. All right, guys, I will end the video today. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. And hopefully this was a helpful thing to you, seeing how some of these things play out. The key here is that you are in control and you decide on any deal that you put together, when you want to exit, how much, if any, money you want to put into it, knowing that the longer you stay in a deal and the more money you put into a deal, the higher your reward will be, but also along with that, the higher your risk. And these deals can be done in so many different ways, and we cover all of them in our course. So there you go. If you have any interest in learning more about this strategy that we've been doing for 2 decades now, you can watch our video presentation. It is at vestrite.com/action. I'll put a link in the description as well. And yeah, it's a video where we walk you through the process, walk you through our strategies, our blueprint. And at the end of that video, if you'd like to get more information, you can book a call with us and we will spend some time on you over the phone, finding out who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and just determining if hey, will you be a good fit for what we do? And we will absolutely let you know that. So again, we'll end it here and we'll catch you in the next one. All right, guys, take care.